Hello everyone, this is Warhawk Beyond 2040 and welcome to a very special edition of the Spider-Man review series. And as I mentioned at the end of the last edition that I did for this series, where I talked about Season 4 in its entirety from start to finish, and it consisted of 11 chapters, which was called Partners in Danger. I mentioned at the end that for the next edition of this series, I was going to be talking about Season 5. And unlike previous seasons where they had one single long form story arc that lasted for that entire season, for Season 5, it's consisted of multiple story arcs. So we had four major story arcs being told in a 13 episode season, which for me is quite a big deal, because to have that many story arcs running alongside each other was quite impressive, in my opinion. And what I've always done in the past is I've always talked about that season's story arc in its entirety as an hour plus long video. So, what I am going to be doing for season 5, I am going to be talking about each story arc as a separate hour plus long video because there's so much to cover, there's so much to talk about, and to present it as an hour plus long video would require a lot of work because there was so much that was going on in season 5. So I feel for all of you, it would make much more sense to just have each one of those story arcs as separate hour plus long videos, and I can just talk about each one of them individually on their own. So that's what we're going to be doing going forward for season 5. So, season 4, which was Partners in Danger, for the most part, was very good. And just like in the name, Partners in Danger saw Spider Man working reluctantly alongside people that he wouldn't normally work with, and he would form very uneasy alliances with unlikely allies. So, in Partners in Danger, we saw Spider Man reluctantly team up with Craven the Hunter, Blade the Vampire Hunter, Mysterio, of all people, the Prowler, who made his first and surprisingly only appearance in the show's entire run, and of course, last but certainly not least, he would also at first reluctantly team up with the Black Cat, but over the course of time, Spider Man would develop feelings for the Black Cat, and the Black Cat would also go on to become one of Spider Man's greatest and most important allies, as well as a potential love interest for Spider Man. And season 4 carried on from the end of season 3, and this was pretty much the aftermath of Mary Jane Watson's disappearance from the end of season 3, where Spider Man carried the guilt and weight of not being able to save Mary Jane. But little did he realise that Mary Jane Watson was actually alive and well. She was trapped in another dimension thanks to the Green Goblin's time dilation accelerator. And we pretty much saw throughout season 4, Spider Man had pretty much cut himself off from everyone around him at the fear that he may end up losing them the same way that he lost Mary Jane. And season 4, Partners in Danger, while it did concentrate on uneasy alliances with unlikely allies, season 4 also saw the return of several familiar faces who we hadn't seen since season 2. As I mentioned already, we saw the return of Craven the Hunter, Blade the Vampire Hunter, Mysterio, Alistair Smythe, the Scorpion, the Vulture, and the Lizard. And we also saw the return of the Green Goblin, this time with Harry Osborn taking up the mantle from his father, Norman Osborn, and officially becoming the brand new Green Goblin after learning that Spider Man is really Peter Parker. And we also saw the return of Morbius, who we hadn't seen since season two, and that was pretty much tied in with the return of Blade, the vampire hunter. And we also saw the return of the Punisher, who we also hadn't seen since season two. And he pretty much offered his services to Anna Watson and was willing to help her find her niece, Mary Jane, and solve the mystery of Peter Parker's involvement with Mary Jane's disappearance. And speaking of Mary Jane, we finally saw Mary Jane Watson return to Peter Parker after disappearing at the end of season three, with no memory of where she's been and how she ended up where she did. But we do learn in season five the shocking real reason why Mary Jane Watson returned and why she has no memory of her previous life in one of the most shocking reveals ever in the entire show's run, which is definitely going to be covered in the next couple of editions going forward in this series. And also, season four, Partners in Danger, while for the most part it was very good, there were a few chapters that I felt had no place in the story arc that they were trying to tell for season four. And the chapters that really stood out to me were The Cat, The Black Cat, Return of Craven, Partners, The Return of the Green Goblin, which for me was probably the best chapter of the whole entire Partners in Danger story arc, The Haunting of Mary Jane Watson, and The Lizard King. Those chapters to me I thought were excellent, and the chapters that didn't really do a lot for me were The Prowler, which I felt could have worked in one of the earlier seasons, maybe season one perhaps. It was okay, but I wouldn't have had that be the final chapter for season four. The other chapters that didn't really do much for me were The Vampire Queen and The Awakening. While it was good to see Blade and Morbius return, I felt that the whole Blade Morbius thing could have been wrapped up in one chapter instead of being spread out to two. And of course, Guilty with Robbie Robertson being framed. To me, while it was okay, it just felt like it was a rehash of Peter Parker getting framed back in season three. I just felt that we were just going over the same thing once again. So if I were to take those chapters that didn't work, cut them out of season four, condense it down, keep the chapters that I mentioned already that really stood out to me, then I think season four would have been a lot better. I'm not saying that season four was bad, it was still good, but I just felt those chapters, cut them out, we would have had probably an even better fourth season, in my opinion. So for season five, which of course was the fifth and final season for Spider Man the Animated Series, season five would feature several key moments that would go on to play very important roles in Spider Man media many years later. We would also see Spider Man learn that he wasn't just a hero for his city, he was also a hero for the entire universe. And we really get to see Spider Man step up to the plate and take his rightful place as not only one of the greatest heroes of all time, but we also get to see Spider Man grow into becoming a leader in his own right. And we would also see lots of shocking revelations and lots of blasts from Spider Man's past come back to haunt him. And we would also see a couple of firsts in Spider Man Season 5. We would see Spider Man assemble a group of Spider Men from different dimensions to stop the Hobgoblin and the Green Goblin, led by Spider Carnage, after Spider Man enters the multiverse thanks to the Beyonder, who tells Spider Man that they have to stop Spider Carnage, otherwise, he will wipe out all fabrics of time. And this would lead to what many refer to years later as the Spider Verse. And also in season 5, we would see Spider Man assemble his own team of heroes to do battle against some of the biggest villains ever in the universe. And this was a game set up by the Beyonder to see which side was strongest, good or evil. And this was the result of many seasons of hinting from Madam Web that she was preparing him for Spider Man's greatest battle ever, which culminated in the 3-part epic Secret Wars. And also in season 5, after first being hinted at the beginning in season 3, Peter Parker finally learned the shocking real reason why his parents disappeared and why he was raised by his Aunt May and Uncle Ben in one of the biggest reveals ever in the entire show's run. And this was something that had never been delved into before, apart from the comic books, but it was also the first time ever in animation that Peter Parker's parents were addressed in detail as to why they really disappeared. And also in season 5, the closest thing we ever got to an Avengers appearance was the Six Forgotten Warriors. And this was also another first where we got to see Spider Man and Captain America working together to stop the Red Skull. And we would also get an appearance from the Silver Sable, who would also work together with Spider Man. And the first and surprisingly only appearance of one of Spider Man's earliest villains, Electro, who would also be revealed to have a very shocking connection to Captain America's greatest enemy, the Red Skull. And after proposing to Mary Jane in season 4, we would see in season 5 Peter Parker and Mary Jane become husband and wife and get married. But unfortunately, the honeymoon would not last, as we would see Peter learn the horrifying truth about his wife Mary Jane and her connection to her ex boyfriend Hydro Man in one of the biggest and most shocking moments ever in the show's entire run, as he learned that the woman that he was married to isn't Mary Jane at all, and the real Mary Jane is still missing. So I'm going to give a quick recap on what's happened in season 4, and then after that, we are going to get straight into talking about season 5, which kicks off with the wedding of Peter Parker and Mary Jane Watson. So, as we saw previously in season 4, we saw Spider Man more or less try to move on from the aftermath of Mary Jane's disappearance at the end of season 3 and carrying the weight and guilt of the fact that he wasn't able to save Mary Jane. And we saw Spider Man more or less shut himself down and cut himself off from everyone around him and not allowing anyone to get close to him again because he was worried that they would end up the same way that Mary Jane Watson did. And not realizing that Mary Jane Watson was alive and well, but she was just trapped in another dimension. We also saw Felicia Hardy was kidnapped by the Kingpin after learning that her father, John Hardesky, was alive and well. And this would lead to Felicia Hardy becoming the Black Cat and begin having run ins with Spider Man. And this would also, for a short time, lead to Felicia Hardy reluctantly working for the Kingpin, but she would quickly become one of Spider Man's greatest allies and a potential love interest for him as well. We would also see Harry Osborn get exposed to the same gas that caused Norman Osborn to become the Green Goblin, and we would eventually see Harry Osborn embrace his dark side and take up his father's mantle and becoming the second Green Goblin after learning that Peter Parker was actually Spider Man. We would then see the Punisher offer his services to Anna Watson, as she asked him to help find her niece and solve the mystery of Peter Parker's involvement in Mary Jane's disappearance. And then this would lead to Mary Jane returning to Peter Parker with no memory of where she's been or how she ended up, but all she knew that she had to come and find him. This would eventually lead to Spider-Man revealing his secret identity to Mary Jane and telling her that he is actually Peter Parker. And then we would see Peter Parker ask for Mary Jane to be his wife after proposing to her, but also explaining to her about the dangers of being Spider Man's wife. Mary Jane accepted the full responsibilities of being Spider Man's wife and accepted Peter Parker's marriage proposal. So now that season 4, the Partners in Danger story arc has concluded, we now begin season 5 with Peter Parker and Mary Jane Watson coming together as husband and wife after Peter proposed to Mary Jane. And this kicks off season 5 with the wedding. So we see Peter Parker and his Aunt May visit a bank where May withdraws her and Ben Parker's wedding rings from storage and bestows them to Peter as a gift for his upcoming wedding to Mary Jane Watson. Peter at first is very reluctant to take them, and May insists that she wants him and Mary Jane to have them because she wants them to be twice as happy as she was with his Uncle Ben. But before Peter can accept them, the bank is robbed by the Scorpion, and Peter quickly slips away to become Spider Man. But before he can return to stop him, the Scorpion snatches the Parkers' wedding rings from May and intends to use them for his own marriage to his girlfriend, Sarah. When Spider Man appears on the scene, Scorpion takes May hostage and Spider Man pursues him outside, where he goads the Scorpion into attacking by hurling insults at him. An enraged Scorpion releases May and charges at Spider Man, but is quickly defeated after Spider Man knocks him into a body of water where Scorpion's powered exoskeleton begins to malfunction and he retreats. Spider Man manages to recover the rings and rescues a frightened May from a collapsing platform before fainting due to the shock. Now, this for me was an excellent way to kick off season 5. And this scene with the Scorpion climbing up the rooftop, holding Aunt May, was definitely something very similar to what we had seen in Spider Man 2 with Dr. Octopus. So it's cool to see how much the 90s cartoon inspired the Sam Raimi movies many years later. And just watching this scene again after such a long time brought back memories of the Spider Man 2 scene with Dr. Octopus taking Aunt May hostage. Meanwhile, at the Ravencroft Institutes for the Criminally Insane, we see Harry Osborn is there, who has been detained, is explaining to Dr. Kafka that he has been having recurring nightmares over Spider Man taking away his loved ones, and even going as far as to say that Norman Osborn and Mary Jane were taken away from him by Peter Parker. And Dr. Kafka explains to Harry that these are just nightmares, Harry. Everybody loves you. Nobody is out to get you. And of course, Harry, as we all know, knows that Spider Man is Peter Parker, but nobody believes him because he has been declared insane. And Dr. Kafka also reassures Harry that Norman Osborn is not the Green Goblin. It's kind of funny how, you know, Norman Osborn became the Green Goblin back in season 3 when he breathed in the green gas thanks to the explosion at Oscorp. And that same green gas also transformed Harry into the second Green Goblin. And both father and son went completely insane over their obsession with Spider Man. Norman Osborn, as we know already, is trapped in another dimension, and Harry has now taken up his father's mantle thanks to the original Green Goblin, who is able to communicate with him through the portal that he's trapped in. Dr. Kafka reassures Harry that he is loved by everyone and that he has visitors, and the visitors turn out to be Liz Allen and Mary Jane. Harry is happy to see both of them until Mary Jane reveals to Harry that she is set to marry Peter Parker. Harry is visibly hurt by this news, although Mary Jane explains that she feels that it should come from her rather than someone else, and Harry feigns approval but makes it very clear that he wishes to be alone. Liz inquires to Harry's well-being, but he insists that he is fine. Later, Harry converses with the spectre of his father, Norman Osborn, the original Green Goblin, who mocks Harry for his inaction. Enraged, Harry executes an escape from his room and subduing a guard and stealing his keys to escape. Yeah, it's a bit of a dick move, really. This is a theme that's carried on quite a lot in the Sam Raimi films. I mean, imagine this. Put yourself in Harry's shoes. You see your ex girlfriend who says, I'm here to see how you are, and you're happy. And then she turns around and says to you, oh, by the way, just to let you know, I'm marrying your best friend next week. Yeah, it's a bit of a dick move because you're Harry, you're sitting there. Oh, thanks for telling me. I know I'm behind bars, but, thanks for letting me know that you're marrying my best friend. That's great. But I suppose in a way it's kind of a decent move on Mary Jane's part because how hurt would Harry have been if he heard the news from someone else or if he saw it in the newspaper? So while in one respect it's good that Mary Jane told Harry that I'm getting married next week, but at the same time it's a little bit of a dick move. But unlike the Sam Raimi movies where Mary Jane was just written to be this, I wouldn't say horrible person, but very selfish. In animation, I feel that Mary Jane tries to do the right thing, even if it's not always the right thing. She comes across that she has a decent heart, whereas in the movies, they say she comes across that she has a decent heart, but I'm not too sure about that. But I thought this scene where Mary Jane and Liz Allen tell Harry that Mary Jane is getting married. I thought this was a cool setup for Harry to quickly re embrace his dark side and become the Green Goblin once again. So this was a cool setup, but at the same time, yeah, it's a bit of a dick move, in my opinion. We then see Mary Jane and Liz Allen leave the building, and Mary Jane says that it was a mistake coming here, and Liz reassures Mary Jane that she did the right thing in telling Harry because imagine how he would have felt if he had found out the news from someone else because Harry needs someone because he's all alone. And Mary Jane says, well, at least he's got you, Liz. That's the main thing. And another thing that some people may not know, unless you've read the comic books, Liz Allen and Harry Osborn actually went on to become a couple for quite some time after Mary Jane married Peter. So while we are getting the wedding of Peter Parker and Mary Jane Watson in this one, we're also slowly starting to build up a new relationship, this time with Harry Osborn and Liz Allen, because it's quite clear that Liz Allen cares very deeply about Harry Osborn, not just as a friend, but more than that. So nice that we're getting that here in season 5 as well. We then see Peter Parker is invited to meet Wilson Fisk, also known as the Kingpin, which surprises Peter because he can't quite understand why Spider Man's enemy, the Kingpin, wants to see him. And Fisk explains to Peter that as a show of appreciation for saving his life, he is taking it upon himself to arrange all of the wedding of Peter and Mary Jane, which Peter is quite surprised by. And we also learn that part of the reason why Fisk is doing this, as he has bought the Daily Bugle as a way to stick it to J. Jonah Jameson, and this leads to Fisk and Parker getting a picture together, which ends up on the front page of the Daily Bugle, much to the shock and dismay of Jameson. I suppose, in a way, it makes sense because let's not forget that back in season one, Peter Parker did save Wilson Fisk's life from the Hobgoblin, not realizing that he was actually saving the Kingpin and that the Hobgoblin actually had a grudge against the Kingpin. But Peter didn't really learn who Fisk really was until season three, when Daredevil confirmed the news about Fisk's true identity. So it's kind of bizarre, but at the same time, I guess it makes sense that Wilson Fisk is the one who finances Peter Parker's wedding. But Jameson, being Jameson, he has to get the last word. So he also takes it upon himself to take care of all of Peter Parker's wedding arrangements and pays for the entire thing, and even going as far as to say to him, it's okay, you don't have to pay me back. You can work it off for the next decade. So, this wedding fiasco is more or less a game of one-upsmanship between Jameson and Fisk, and Parker is right in the middle of it. We then see Jameson argues with Wilson Fisk via the telephone intercom over who will provide the best gifts for Peter's wedding, as Jameson declares that he is a father figure to Peter and says that he knows the top pastry chef in Queens, while Fisk counters back by saying that he knows the Queen's top pastry chef as well. Oh boy, let the games begin. A short while later at Oscorp, Harry Osborn assumes the identity of the Green Goblin once more and allies himself with Alistair Smythe, who aids him in developing an army of robot goblin soldiers who will accompany him to destroy a wedding, much to Smythe's confusion. The Scorpion also walks in and offers his assistance after Smythe helps repair his suit, which was damaged in the fight against Spider-Man. And Harry says that, come on guys, let's go. We've got a wedding to attend to. What an unlikely team we've got here. Harry Osborn as the Green Goblin, Alistair Smythe, and the Scorpion. You couldn't find a more unlikely team than these three. Three massive egos. Although I would probably say that Harry and the Scorpion have much bigger egos than Smythe, because Smythe, he's got an ego, but I wouldn't say as big as those two. All he wants to do is just save his dad, which is fair enough. But those two, yeah, I wouldn't really trust them as far as I can throw. But I'd still watch out for Smythe. But he's a clever guy, so he gets a free pass. But imagine that you're a villain and you pair up with two other villains, and the first thing they ask you is, so, what's our first order of business? And the guy who brings you together and says to you, let's gate crash a wedding. You're going to be very confused. But this is still a lot of fun. This is quite enjoyable, but it's just nuts in a good way. Meanwhile, at the wedding ceremony, we see Peter is getting ready to walk down the aisle as Robbie Robertson, who is Peter's best man, makes some last minute checks with Peter and assures him that he has the wedding ring safe, even though Peter asked him a minute ago. And we start to see the guests coming in, as we see Flash Thompson is a guest and Felicia Hardy is also a guest as well. And anybody who has read the comic books will remember that Flash Thompson was Peter's best man. But for the show, they decided to make Robbie Robertson Peter's best man. And all due respect to Flash Thompson, I think Robbie Robertson as Peter's best man makes perfect sense, because if you watch all 5 seasons, Robbie Robertson has been a rock of support for both Spider-Man and Peter Parker, and he's been one of Spider-Man's most die-hard supporters and has always defended him at every opportunity. So to have him there as Peter's best man makes perfect sense, and I can't think of anybody better, except maybe Harry Osborn, who could be Peter's best man other than Robbie Robertson. He's just the perfect choice. He's just a natural, and quite frankly, I'd much rather have Robertson as my best man. than Jameson, in all honesty. As all of the guests settle down, we hear the music start to play as we see Mary Jane Watson in a full white wedding dress is walked down the aisle by Dr. Kurtz Connors, who was asked by both Mary Jane and Peter in season 4 to give Mary Jane away at the wedding. And as we see Mary Jane stands next to Peter, we see the priest start to read the vows and ask everyone if there's anybody in this room who feels that this couple should not be married, please speak now. And then we see Peter's spider sense go off, and we see the Green Goblin gate crashes the wedding, and Scorpion runs into the room as well, along with an army of robots that were built by Smythe. Well, if you're going to have a Spider Man wedding, might as well have some uninvited guests. And who better to have as the ultimate gatecrasher than the Green Goblin? Doesn't get any better than that, depending on how you look at it. During the confusion, Peter changes into his Spider Man costume and draws the attacker's attention away from the evacuating crowd and engages the intruders in combat outside the building, and he is soon joined by the Black Cat and Wilson Fisk, who remotely deploys a Mega Slayer robot after recognizing Smythe's designs. Spider Man is both appreciative and surprised by the sudden appearance of both of these allies, even wincing at a blown kiss from the cat, who says that it's nice to be working with you again, Spider. Spider Man, of course, says nothing about this and carries on luring the attackers away from the building. Unbeknownst to everyone, Harry attempts to force the priest to wed him and Mary Jane, which the priest hesitates to do, and then only reluctantly. After the Scorpion and the Goblin robots are defeated by Spider Man and the Black Cat, Spider Man rushes back inside the building, but Harry threatens to destroy everyone with a pumpkin bomb. Spider Man begs Harry to not do this, and at that moment we see Liz Allen interrupts the scene and pleads for Harry to follow his conscience and proclaiming her sympathy for his situation, and even going as far as to say that she loves him, and also convinces Harry that if you truly love Mary Jane, let her go, and realise that there is someone else who cares for him other than his own father. Harry eventually surrenders himself to Liz and asks to be taken back to Ravencroft for further help. Mary Jane then thanks Spider Man for saving his life, and as the guests come back in, she says to Spider Man, "Can you do me a favour, please, Spider Man? Can you find Peter Parker for me so we can get married?" And winks at him as Spider Man web swings away. And as all of the guests sit back down and settle in, the wedding then goes ahead as Peter Parker finally marries Mary Jane as they are declared husband and wife, and the two newlyweds share a kiss, much to the delight of all of the guests. And we see the new husband and wife depart in an old van given to them as a gift by Jameson, who joyfully remarks that Wilson Fisk would have never thought of something like this. To which Peter humorously agrees and says, "You know something, JJ? You're right. Wilson Fisk would have never thought of something like this." As we see, the old van is covered in Spider Man anti headlines from Jameson's newspaper clippings, and as the van leaves, everyone applauds as Mary Jane throws out her bouquet of flowers. And then from the other side, we see the spectre of the Green Goblin trapped in limbo and infuriated at Spider Man's happiness and cries out for Harry's attention in vain. But unfortunately for the Goblin, no one can hear him. And that wraps up my review on The Wedding. Overall, this was an excellent opener for season 5. This was such a fun episode. I really enjoyed this one a lot. And we all know that Peter Parker getting married was never going to be smooth sailing. We all knew that something was going to happen at the wedding. And sure enough, we weren't disappointed. And as I said earlier, who better to gate crash the wedding than the Green Goblin? I can't think of anybody else who could do such a dastardly thing, but the Green Goblin. And having the Green Goblin, the Scorpion, and Smythe working together is just nuts. It's the most unlikely team of villains you will ever see in a Spider-Man cartoon. It just doesn't work, but that's the beauty of it. That's the whole point. It's not meant to work. And seeing Peter and Mary Jane finally getting married was a great payoff, and this was excellent. The only thing, and this is not an issue, this is just more how I feel. I really feel that this should have been the show's finale because, you know, Peter and Mary Jane finally getting married. I think that should have been the way to end this show. I think it just seemed more final, in my opinion. And that's the only thing I would change. Everything else, I would keep it exactly the same. But I think this should have been the last episode. You know, after you've had all that big epic stuff, all the dark stuff as well, I think having this be the final episode would have been a great high note to go out on because it did have its serious stuff, but this was just more fun, and that's what it's supposed to be, you know, just a fun episode. Nothing doom and gloom as such. I mean, there were some serious aspects with Harry Osborn, but by and large, this was pretty much a action driven fun episode. I thought this was really good. And having the Black Cat there to assist Spider Man during a gate crashing of his own wedding was just hilarious, but awkward at the same time. You know, you got them to fighting by each other's side. We all know their history and the potential romance that they could have had. And you've got Black Cats there winking at Spider Man, blowing him a kiss, and saying, "It was really nice to be working with you again, Spider." And Spider Man just stands there like, "Oh boy." Oh, it was just brilliant. And even though season 5 was the final one for the show, the wedding really kicks things off in a big way, and I loved it. As I said, I absolutely loved it. I wouldn't have changed anything about this except I would have made this the final episode. I did read somewhere, I think it was on the Spider-Man animated Wikipedia page, that the wedding was supposed to be the final episode. There was supposed to be a situation where Spider-Man would have found Mary Jane after Secret Wars, and it would have just led straight into the wedding. But for some reason, they changed it and made this the first episode. So I'm not really entirely sure what happened there. But as I said, this should have been the show's finale, in my opinion. Just had something about it, it was just a fitting conclusion. Peter Parker and Mary Jane getting married. But as we all know, this honeymoon period would be very short lived, as we learn later on in season 5 the shocking truth about Mary Jane and how she came back, which, as I said already, this is going to be talked about in great depth as we go forward. So that's going to be it from me. I am going to wrap this up now. What did you guys think of the wedding? Did you enjoy it? What was your thoughts on Peter Parker and Mary Jane getting married? Do you think it was a game changer? And also, how did you feel about the Green Goblin making another appearance as the wedding gatecrasher? Do you think that was appropriate? And also, do you think the wedding should have been the series finale for the show? Or do you think it worked fine as the opener for season 5? You know what to do, guys. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave your thoughts and comments down below. And the next time that I am going to be back, I am going to be doing a special hour plus long video on the first of 4 major story arcs for season 5. And the first one is going to be The Six Forgotten Warriors, where Peter Parker learns the shocking truth about the disappearance of his mum and dad. You know how it all goes down, so make sure you don't miss that. And it's going to be an emotional roller coaster. So I will see all of you next time for another edition of the Spider Man review series. So until then, take care, everybody, and stay safe. And once again, as always, much appreciated. Thanks for listening.